We just got a brand new Shirley, Millie, and Lelouch as part of the cafe event. But should you summon or purchase these characters? Well, by the end of the video, you're going to find out. Okay, so let's start with Butler Lelouch. I'll click on him right here, and here are his stats. He is a rank 3 Annihilator, cost 4 to deploy, which is actually really good, decent health, 628.2% attack power, which is actually pretty solid for an Annihilator that costs 4 to deploy. Now let's go to his abilities. His first is an anti-air effect, where 1 second after placement and every 30 seconds after that, he will increase damage to flying units by 70% for 30 seconds. Just for some perspective on comparing him to Kjol, Valletta, and Minami. So Kjol and Valletta also do 30% extra damage. Valletta's lasts for 70 seconds, Kjol I believe it's 50. Then Minami does 35% extra damage, but his lasts for 30 seconds. So Lelouch's effect here is the second best, and the same as Valletta, which is actually pretty good. So his second effect is decreases the enemy's action by 0.65 times for 2 seconds after hitting them with an attack, and it does not stack. Now my thoughts on this character. Butler Lelouch is actually the second best Annihilator, or really pilot in general, for taking out air units right now, or flying units, however the game words it, because he has 628 attack power, which is actually stronger than Minami and Kjol, but obviously lower than Valletta. His slowdown ability is not bad, especially if you use him in the Borai, which attacks 2 targets at once. It doesn't stack, which is annoying, but it can come in handy to decrease the speed of many enemy nightmare frames, which will give you time to deploy other ones to the battlefield, or of course, take them out faster. Because the slower they go, then obviously you can put more units on there and take it out, or it can also stall the bosses, so it's actually pretty useful in that regard. Is it better than Ashford Lelouch? No, I still think stun on deployment is better than slowing down enemies every time you hit them. That being said though, having both on the battlefield could not hurt you. Another thing about this Lelouch that's a bit underrated is the fact that the cost is 4. I believe that's still the lowest cost of any Annihilator in the game, and that includes, by the way, the Japanese version. Although I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure 4 seems pretty low. And the reason why that low cost is relevant, because if you want to use them in the Borai, it shouldn't be too expensive, especially if you use the new Millie for this event, plus the previous 2, which will give a cost reduction of 7. Until we get the Gwaine with Lelouch, this will probably be the second best pilot for taking out flight units. Arguably that Lelouch is the best, followed by Valletta. But until then though, this is like your best option to use. I know that many of you are having issues taking out flying units, so this Lelouch could be a good aid to help you out. Plus, he will slow them down so you can take them out faster so they won't go past you, which is really annoying by the way. But when it comes to Ashford Faction Wars, you definitely want to use this character in your teams going forward. I can tell you, even in my experience, I still use some of the older Ashford characters on my teams, and I actually kind of wish I had him for those because there are many situations where I think he would combo well with the Gwaine, but unfortunately, I just don't have him. His high health is actually really solid. My only complaints about this character are just the low attack, and I think that Ashford Lelouch has a better stun effect overall, and if you don't have any roster spots on your team yet because you're not ranked 13 or 21 or even 8 for that matter, I can't really justify putting Butler Lelouch on your team if you haven't put Ashford Lelouch on your team. Now that being said, once you do have a full roster, having both could be really awesome, as you have like the Stun Brothers, even though they are the same person, but you get what I'm saying. Overall though, I would definitely recommend summoning this character. Now let's move on to the new Millie. So we are at this store because you don't summon Millie like you summon Shirley or Lelouch. Instead, you purchase her using resources you acquire throughout the event. If you want to view her stats, you can go up to the character and click on them, like this. So Millie is a rank 3 strategy type pilot. She has 527 attack power, pretty decent health. She only costs 3 to deploy once you fully upgrade her, which is not bad, and actually it really goes well with her effect, which we'll get to in a second. Now, when it comes to her effects, first, on deployment, she will increase the action speed of one unit, besides herself of course, by 1.525 times, which is a really obscure number, for 17.5 seconds. If you want some context, that's actually faster than Clovis, who does 1.35 times, I believe. So this speed increase is better. Next, she has a cost reduction for everyone in this faction by 3. Get used to that because every single event is going to have a character with a faction deployment reduction cost effect. Usually it's the free character, but that's not always the case. Now, if you notice, this melee reduces her cost to deploy everyone in her faction by 3, and her cost is also 3, which means she's technically free to deploy if you fully max her out. Now, obviously, she'll still cost more if she's using a Nightmare frame, but at least her cost would be 0. Now, if you combine her with the other 2 melees, just like Butler Lelouch, you can reduce the cost further by 4, which is pretty good. Here are my thoughts on the new melee. Her ability to increase the speed was obviously made for Butler Lelouch to help him stun even more enemies, or slow them down. It's not actually a stun ability. I like her cost reduction ability, but I do wonder how often it'll come into play if you already have 2 other melees that do the same thing, but for all Ashford pilots. As I said with Butler Lelouch, roster space may be tight, so you might have to decide between using this melee or the previous 2 melees. And if that was the case, obviously use the previous 2 melees since their cost reduction affects all Ashford pilots, and this one only affects her faction. Now, with a full roster, or basically a full roster, using all 3 can be a very deadly combination in an Ashford-orientated team. Now, in the Japanese version, I don't see people using this melee often. In fact, I don't remember people using her much at all. They probably did though when she first came out, but slowly stopped using her when better pilots came out. But I do see her pop up every now and then because her attack speed increase ability has come into play for the Nightmare Frame boss event, where you want to increase the speed of one pilot, but you don't have any other pilots that do this, since Taizo, Colin, and Maribel only target their specific faction, and Millie does not target a faction, just anyone in range, and her effect is better than Clovis. While I like the speed increase ability, I do wish it applied to more than one pilot, but I understand that might be kinda broken. Even Taizo, Anniversary Colin, and Maribel only target their faction. It's not a generic action speed increase, which is why the increase itself is significantly better than Millie's. But for a generic increase, it's not terrible, but I think Clovis would be better in most situations, assuming we are not talking about the Ashford faction challenges. Another thing about this character that I don't like is that she has low defense and low health, so while she has pretty decent attack, she may not stick around too long if she's by herself on the battlefield, so make sure to have a healer with her or other pilots to back her up. But I think the purpose behind her being a strategy type pilot is to deploy, give the speed increase, then withdraw her and put her somewhere else on the battlefield. Unlike Ashford Lelouch, or of course the new Zero, she doesn't have the same level attack power to stay on the battlefield for long term, unless of course, again, you're backing her up. Definitely not my favorite pilot among the 3, but she is useful right now and will be in niche situations going forward, so I definitely think it's worth spending your resources to buy her, specifically because she is a limited pilot and you can never have too many of those. Now let's talk about the new Shirley. Okay, so here's the new Shirley. I'm going to click on her and let's get to her character. So Shirley is a rank 4 special type pilot. Now the first thing you probably noticed is that this Shirley costs 0 to deploy, which is really good. Obviously you got to max her out first. Now when it comes to her attack power, it's 394, which is okay. I wish it was a lot higher, and I will state that that's one of the things I don't like about this character. Now moving on to her effects. Upon placement, heals 40% of the HP of all allied units within range, excluding this unit, and heals 5% of the HP of all deployed allied units for 15 seconds at 3-second intervals. So this means that the healing effect will last for 15 seconds, and she will do this every 3 seconds. And now for the second ability, which states that reduces this unit's redeploy time by 30%, and the redeploy time of all allied units is reduced by 20% during combat, which is really powerful. In fact, she's the first pilot to do this. Here are my thoughts on this new Shirley. On one hand, you have to respect the fact that this character has two really powerful healing abilities. One that happens immediately on deployment, and one that happens to all pilots that are deployed. Just for some perspective, the only other pilot in the game that does this, and of course I'm talking about the Japanese version, is New Year's C2. Yes, there's another Shirley that also heals all pilots, but the activation conditions are different. I will also state that New Year's C2 has a much better global healing ability, but obviously we don't have her right now. With a fast relocation time and low cost, you'll be able to heal lots of pilots on your battlefield very quickly, almost as efficient as having potentially 2 or 3 healers that are deployed, assuming you have that many roster spots. That's why this Shirley is very powerful, because she can cover multiple areas on the battlefield. Now, unfortunately, she's not a healer pilot herself, so she only heals on deployment and with her global effect, which means she can't technically replace pilots like Millie or the other Shirley. That being said though, I still think it's worth using her because of the fact that she can cover lots of ground. Now, Shirley's fast relocation time for all other pilots can combo with pilots like Jeremiah, who already have a fast relocation time. Keep in mind though, there is a limit to how much you can reduce the relocation time by, but as of right now, you could still combine her with Jeremiah and further reduce the time by 5 seconds, which as you guys know is a huge deal. And of course, making it so other pilots will also have fast relocation time will come in handy during the battle, because the faster you can get your pilots back out on the battlefield, the better your chances for winning. Her global healing ability combos really well with C2, as you have barriers that protect your pilots, plus they're constantly being healed by Shirley. Now, because Shirley's stats are not the best, including low health and of course low attack power, if you want to maintain that global healing ability, it's probably best to keep her with another healer or just out of range from most enemies. Although given the fact that her first healing ability is much better, she probably won't be sticking around too much anyways, but if you do plan to use her for the global healing ability, definitely keep her out of range from enemies because she will not survive. Now, for 90% of situations, I don't think you need this Shirley on your team, but for the really hard missions like Hard Expedition or Extra Expedition, yeah, this pilot will probably make a huge difference going forward on your teams, but you do have some budget substitutes like Sayako, who does something similar, but obviously it's not as good. So should you summon this character? Well, I think a few pulls couldn't hurt, regardless if you're whaling or free to play. Beyond that though, I don't think so. There will be better pilots down the road, and like I said, there are other pilots in the game that are comparable to this one. So in my mind, the best pilot on this banner for right now and long term is probably Butler Lelouch. So if this is your first time playing Geass Lost Stories, meaning this is your first banner, then you probably have questions on how to play the game. Well, you're in luck, because I made a beginner's guide, which you can watch right here, and here are top 10 tips for beginners. Go check out those videos right now.